And so back in 2008, I cold emailed Steve Jobs, and which never works, right? And I guessed his email, and I guessed wrong at first. And long story short, I guessed again, and got an email back from Steve Jobs, said, can I call you? And
Welcome back to the Health Longevity Secrets Show, where we push the limits of human potential and unlock the secrets to our health and longevity with your host, Dr. Robert Lovekin.
What do you build after you've helped create Apple Health and the Apple Watch? For Bob Messerschmidt, the answer was simple: a device that makes inflammation visible and right in your home. In this episode, we go beyond step counts and heart rate into the single inflammation marker that behaves like a biological clock for aging. We'll talk about how something called ESR can track inflammaging, and how Bob cut his own inflammation in half, and how this new home device might change the way we practice preventive medicine forever. You really don't want to miss this episode.
And now, please enjoy this week's episode.
Hey Bob, welcome to the program.
Dr. Rob, how are you? Very nice to see you.
I'm so excited about our discussion today, and I guess maybe to start off, your history is fascinating. I mean, you started out studying biochemistry and optics, and then you went to build a famous device for Apple Computer that you worked on that we wear on our wrists.
Still wear it.
So maybe tell us a little bit about that journey, and maybe the moment that you thought, hey, I'm just not going to build devices for companies, I'm going to build a device that makes inflammation visible in every home. So how did you get from there to here?
It's a long story. So if we have some time. I did start out in biochemistry and thought I was going to go to med school, actually, back when I was in high school. My older brother, did go to medical school. He's a cardiac surgeon. But I was more interested in building instrumentation, even from the early days. And so at the University of Pennsylvania, had financial aid like a lot of us did, and I worked in a work-study job in a laboratory. And the job was, there were actually two jobs. One was either making up solutions for biochemistry studies. We were studying the mechanisms of muscle contraction in that lab. But there was another job, work-study job, that was putting together all the instrumentation. And I was always a very mechanical guy, and I realized that the professor realized that that's really what resonated for me, was building instruments. And so over my admittedly very long career, it's always been building instrumentation of one form or another. And also very entrepreneurial right from the start in my early career, early, mid, and later career, always working most happily anyway, at small companies, either other people's startups or startups that I myself had founded. And I was always doing things related to spectroscopy, even from the early days. And I just sort of had a natural affinity for optics and geometric optics and lenses and mirrors and systems involving those things. And so infrared spectroscopy, vibrational spectroscopy has always been my bailiwick. The shift towards consumer facing things was when I had a technology that was an optical system to measure things non-invasively. So it could send a beam of light into human tissue and measure things, various things. I won't go into detail about what could be measured. But I thought, well, this is something that a consumer company getting into health applications might be interested in. And so back in 2008, I cold emailed Steve Jobs, which never works, right? And I guessed his email, and I guessed wrong at first. And long story short, I guessed again, and got an email back from Steve Jobs, said, can I call you? And so that started a journey to have my company was acquired by Apple back in around that time frame, and I became an Apple platform architect. Anybody who's an Apple-ophile knows the history of that stage of Apple. You can read Walt Mossberg's excellent book. But I was there in the very early foundational stages of both Apple Health, was just starting up, so I was a founding member of that team, and the Apple Watch, which was just a project at that point. It wasn't a product. It was a project that SJ, as we called him, had started up both of those things. And I got to interact with him through the acquisition and through, a few early generational stages of the projects before he obviously, very unfortunately, got very sick. There was, he helped me. He helped me get an understanding of why, for health, if you really want to change and improve health in the world, having that conversation directly with consumers and giving people an idea of a feeling of self-efficacy that they can manage their own health. And this is what we've come to call now, I guess we would call digital health. That was really the foundation of it. And he felt, and I came to believe, that these conversations directly with consumers were the fundamental way we were going to help people become healthier. And so that's what I've, at Apple, and then since then I've really dived into that, having the consumer conversation, and right now focused on inflammation, which I know you agree is kind of foundational to health. And it came up with the current product, the core device. We have a device that can help people track, is tracking, I think, seeing a number that you can see change over time on a fairly frequent basis, even if it's not continuous, if it's frequently episodic. Having that information, what we're hoping to offer, what we do offer, is a marker that allows you to track systemic inflammation over time right in your home using a very inexpensive consumerized device. My hope is that it's going to help make a lot of people a lot healthier.
Well, we'll definitely get to that. But before we leave Apple, I mean, that's such a great story with the emailing Steve Jobs and getting a response like that. And certainly what an exciting time to be at that company when their attention was directed to consumer health. And, it was just such a visionary period. And certainly, other companies have been there, Google and Microsoft and all are at that. Eventually, we're focusing on consumer health. And to be clear, you're no longer with Apple, right? So you don't speak for them. But I was wondering, the Apple Watch has so many revolutionary features, and the development was so powerful. But it seems like in the last few years, it's sort of peaked. In other words, I'm not seeing the rate of innovation of other things on the watch. And is that what, I mean, just speculation, is that maybe all the low-hanging fruit has been grabbed, or is it a difference in corporate vision of Apple and other companies that look elsewhere, or why do you think the Apple Watch today is not that different than the Apple Watch a few years ago? Really, even we're not having that pace of like, oh wow, here's another is that overregulation with the FDA? What's going on?
It's not. I don't believe there's overregulation. I think Apple regulates their output a lot more stringently than FDA could ever regulate their output. And they always have. Historically, Steve Jobs he would see 1,000 sort of innovative things in a week. Maybe not 1,000, but he'd see lots of innovative things in a week. Most of them never saw the light of day. And I think that's still the culture at Apple, that there's a really strong filter at Apple, stronger than at any of the other digital health companies. So you're not going to see a feature in an Apple Watch that isn't like really, really strongly valid. And I don't think you'll ever get that. I don't think they'll ever have a situation where where something gets to market and is thought to be inaccurate. I mean, you can look at, for example, the pulse ox not the pulse ox, but the photoplethysmography, just the pulse rate measurements on the Apple Watch, and how accurate are they, or how accurate are the sleep parameters and so forth. And time and time again, I see these reports, that are done by independent studies, and the Apple devices are always the most valid and the most highly correlated with the gold standard clinical numbers. So I think, if there's a problem, I think that's just slow. It takes a long time to generate that degree of validity in data when it comes to digital health. And I would say I value that, and I wouldn't do it a different way. But it is maddening, because I think we're very early days in terms of what will be possible to do in terms of body worn measurements, but you can't move faster than the data.
Yeah, and it's not a bug, it's a feature, and maybe we just mined that form factor. It's like the phone. The phone is it's sort of asymptotically approaching. There are very few things each year that come out. You can't expect it to improve, and maybe it's the same thing with body measurements and the watch and health measurements. But
you bring up a really good point. The wrist is a uniquely bad place to get any sort of health data. It's like the last place you would choose on the body to get any sort of signals, either optical signals or, quite frankly, electrical signals. But that's driven by, user acceptance, right? So people already wear a thing on their wrist. And, to a lesser extent, people already wear a thing on their finger. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get, Apple always felt, the really smart people at Apple anyway, always felt that you're not going to get a lot of traction with, for example, a chest patch. You're never going to see, from an electro. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. From an electrochemistry point of view, you would like both of those things, right? You'd like an EEG sort of band on your forehead, and you'd like a chest patch going across the midline, and you'd really have a nice electrochemistry setup, but you're never going to see that with an Apple logo on it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Well, there's one parameter the Apple Watch doesn't measure that now that you have brought to fruition, and we're going to talk about your company, Core Health, and how it measures inflammation via really this unprecedented and at-home device. And full disclosure, I'm an advisor to Core Health, but I only advise those companies that I'm excited about and that I would use myself and for my family members. But before we talk about the device, let's step back and maybe just set the stage on what is inflammation, why is it important? Give us the inflammation 101 for our listeners who may not be on top of this right now.
Right. Okay. Well, I feel a little self-conscious doing that because you're more expert at it than I. But I'll so stop me if I say anything wrong. But when I started reading articles about what is sort of root cause, right, when it comes to all sorts of chronic conditions, and started reading people making the connection with inflammation in the body, I knew right then, this was upon, having already left Apple, but I knew this was a thing that I wanted to focus on, a way to get a trackable number that could be related to inflammation. And if there was any other matrix in which I could make the measurement besides a blood sample, I would be doing it that way. But we are using a blood sample from a finger stick. So inflammation is a process. You read all the time that it can be either good inflammation or bad inflammation. So the body does use inflammation as a way to repair itself. But there's some really excellent tests that it's a very complicated set of biochemical systems in your body ends up producing proteins and they're usually produced in the liver. And these inflammatory proteins are, and there's a wide array of them. They're called acute phase reactants, and there's a soup of proteins that can be measured in blood. So there are all kinds of indicators of an inflammatory process. And so there are several longstanding markers that have been available for years. In the case of the marker that I look at, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, it's been around for over 100 years. You know, if you have a measurement, let's make the analogy to blood pressure. Blood pressure is something that you can measure. And so then what scientists do is they try to use a measurement that they have and they're curious about, and they try to correlate it with outcomes. And so it's in the case of blood pressure, for example, blood pressure is a prognostic indicator of morbidity and mortality if you have blood pressure over 120/80. And some people say the lower the better. Erythrocyte sedimentation rate as an inflammation marker is the same way. So, you know, it's a compound marker or signal. It's almost a vital sign, like blood pressure is, of a process and a series of processes in your body. And when this marker is higher, it's correlated with an increased level of morbidity and mortality, all-cause morbidity and mortality. So the inverse of mortality is longevity. So a lower ESR number, well studied, as I said, for over 100 years in the literature, a lower ESR number is correlated with more longevity. So, you know, just at a very sort of high level, it's a strong, independent prognostic indicator of longevity. So if I can, and it's fungible. So it's a number that you can impact through either, you know, medical interventions, but, you know, what I'm more interested in is lifestyle interventions as a way to lower inflammation and lower sedimentation rate. And it's a very fungible number. You can impact it with dietary changes, activity changes, sleep changes, and so forth and so on. So, to me, is almost it's a marker. I don't want to be sacrilegious, but it's almost a marker that is, you know, let's say it's foundational, that it can really, if you only had one number to track to manage your chronic health, your chronic wellness, I would choose you know, a indicator of inflammation, and I do. So that's why I track my inflammation weekly. Yeah.
So let's unpack that a little bit. So inflammation, first of all, it's a natural thing. We all have it, right? In fact, if we didn't have inflammation, we'd be dead, right? Because acute inflammation, sort of like stress. Acute stress is good, chronic stress is bad. Well, similarly, acute inflammation, which is like if I stick my finger with a thorn from a rose, there will be redness around there. There will be those acute phase reactants you talk about. Things will happen in my body that sort of repels that foreign material and protects me from that invasion, and then it goes away. So that you know, little bump in inflammation is good, and it literally saves my life. And the problem is,
right,
in society today, there are things, lifestyle, and as it turns out, aging itself, that drive inflammation all the time, and it gets turned on. So what does that mean? Well, like you say, that you get all these acute phase reactants, and the inflammation drives essentially all the chronic diseases of aging, the things we've talked about a lot in this show. You know, heart attack is inflammation of the blood vessels. Atherosclerosis, stroke is inflammation of the blood vessels. You know, Alzheimer's disease is inflammation of the brain. You know, neurodegenerative diseases are inflammation of the brain. Insulin resistance and diabetes is related to inflammation. And so much, you know, as you point out, Bob, that so many of these chronic diseases are driven by inflammation, and these are the diseases that essentially age us and determine our longevity, that they've even coined a term called inflammaging, right? that it's the inflammation that drives aging and
Yeah,
all. So
yeah.
it's a super important marker that we can actually measure through the test you mentioned, and there's another lab test that doctors use also called the CRP, and some of the patients may be familiar with that, or some of the people may be familiar with that, called C-reactive protein that a doctor will order, and they'll order your test, the ESR, that is based on the erythrocyte sedimentation rate. And just to be clear, definition, erythrocytes are red blood cells, and sedimentation rate is how fast they sediment through a liquid of the plasma. And if you think about it, the number of those acute phase reactants, those inflammatory particles, slow down the descent of the sedimentation rate of the red blood cells. So you have it's literally the time it takes to sediment, right, Bob?
Correct. Yeah, correct. It's actually there's, I don't want to make it too complex, but there's a process that goes on that's regulated by these inflammatory proteins that are in the plasma. And what they do, but we're measuring red cells. So why am I talking about two different things? Well, the inflammatory proteins that are in the plasma, they cause surface effects on the red cells, and the red cells then, it causes them to become sticky. So stickiness is a bad thing when you're talking about blood, right? You don't want your blood to be sticky. And what happens is the red blood cells clump together. They form these stacks of, if you know what a red cell looks like, if your audience knows what a red cell looks like, they're kind of frisbee shaped. They're pancakes. And so they stack together in what's called a rouleau, which is a French word for a stack. And when they stack together, because they're stickier, because there are inflammatory proteins, they become heavier and they fall faster in the plasma. So just early scientists discovered this effect and noticed that it was correlated with health conditions. That's why we have ESR today. Just like blood pressure. Blood pressure is not measuring directly a condition. It's a sign. It's a sign of something. And ESR similarly is a sign that there are inflammatory proteins present in the blood. CRP being one of them. So ESR is actually measuring CRP along with other inflammatory proteins.
Okay, and the CRP test is also a blood test, but you have to send it into a lab, and then it typically takes a few days to get the result from your doctor. And now the real breakthrough that you have with the Core Health device, and maybe show it to the people. It's beautifully designed. It looks like an Apple product. How could that be? It's clean, white. It's
Absolutely. So this is the device. I won't say we didn't learn that I didn't learn anything at Apple, but it's very simple. And I have an old broken down one here. There's normally a dust cover, but that's what it looks like. And then there's a test tube also, and these are single-use disposable test tubes. And you put a small amount of blood in this test tube, fill it up from a finger stick, and you put it in the device.
Yeah, and so the difference between the CRP is, and the real breakthrough of this device is, I can do it at my home and I get the result essentially right away. I don't have to send it into a lab and wait a few days to get the result back. So I could track things even day by day or even hour by hour if I wanted to.
That's right.
And before we leave this, we get into this more, before we leave CRP, what's the difference between ESR and CRP as far as how they measure inflammation? We talked about how they measure it. The CRP is a single protein. It's a subset of the total proteins that the ESR measures on your device. So how does that translate into clinically actionable differences between those two measurements? Or are they completely the same? And we should
they're not complete.
Together?
They're not completely the same. So there are, let me try to summarize here. They are in comparative studies where people have looked at gotten a blood sample and looked at both the CRP and the ESR. They're strongly overlapped. So when in 87% of the samples that they had in one study, when ESR is high, CRP is also high, and when ESR is low, CRP is also low. So they're 87%, 85 to 87% overlapped. There are edge cases where they don't give the same information, and that's because the kinetics are different. So CRP is a single protein, and therefore you can imagine, since it's reflecting just one protein, it's quicker to go up and quicker to come back down again. So it's much more of a rapid response. Imagine like you were looking at an instantaneous glucose level. And ESR is a little more time averaged. It's a little bit slower to rise and a little bit slower to fall. And you could think of that like the measurement, the similar glucose measurement is called hemoglobin A1C. It's the longer term effect of hemoglobin A1C is kind of like a 90-day average. It tells you what your blood glucose has been doing over the last 90 days. ESR is not that much of an average. It's like a several day average of what your inflammation has been doing. So, I actually would not recommend measuring ESR daily. I would measure it on a weekly basis. That's what we recommend to people. And people typically do it either weekly or monthly. You don't have to do it weekly, but that would be the best cadence. And last but not least, they're different because CRP is one inflammatory marker. It's produced in the liver. And it doesn't reflect as many inflammatory pathways as ESR does. So ESR is reflecting some inflammatory pathways that CRP misses. So you could use one or the other. We focused on ESR for all kinds of productization reasons, and it's a very good marker. Can I say one other thing about it? I know you want to jump in, but I want to say the ESR was, and well, it still is a very often ordered lab test. But when laboratory medicine went to centralized blood testing, ESR became less commonly prescribed because you really need fresh blood in order to measure it. You want to measure ESR on a blood sample that's less than 4 hours old. And now we're talking about regional blood laboratories where they're drawn at a phlebotomist's office and then they're shipped off somewhere to LabCorp or Quest have a central lab somewhere. It's very often more than 4 hours before that sample gets run. It could be 12 hours. It could be 24 hours. And it's not really possible to get an accurate ESR if the sample is that old. It just there's no storage condition that allows you to get a perfectly accurate ESR number. So this idea of measuring in the home has once again made ESR a useful test. And a very good test.
Yeah, there's one other advantage that we talked about offline that's fascinating. I want to bring back up about the ESR advantages over CRP, and that is we talked about inflammation increasing in everybody with aging. Right?
Yeah.
The older we get, the more inflammation and stuff, but with CRP, it doesn't reliably increase so much. We can't do a biological clock with it, like an inflammation clock. But what about with ESR?
Yeah, ESR, you're absolutely right. That was immediately apparent to me. And, well, it's in the literature, but I also see it in the core data. So I can look at anonymized data in our user population. And the average number, the average reading is strongly correlated with age. And it's separated, it's different for males and females. So if I create a plot of, all of the user data versus age, I see a linear slope increase for ESR with age. And what is that? What is that when you have a slope with age? That's a clock, right? So ESR as a marker by itself, a single biomarker, biological clock, is pretty powerful, right? If you want to know how rapidly you're aging or whether you're aging more than the average person in the cohort. And this effect is really interesting. I find the second sort of really interesting thing about this aging effect and the fact that ESR can be used as a clock is if you look in a population of people that don't have sort of Western lifestyle, so if you look in a more primitive or agrarian society, you look at it, you do a population study in that cohort, there's no age dependence in that cohort. It turns out that people don't get higher inflammation as they get older if they live in a very sort of agrarian lifestyle where they work hard every day and they don't eat Twinkies.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to look at that. I mean, there's all this talk about the Amish, and how they,
Yeah.
embrace a more, eschewing super ultra processed foods and things, and it'd be interesting to look at theirs. But that's fascinating that the ESR, unlike the C-reactive protein, is a reliable biological clock and a measurement of aging. So you can put yourself on a graph of what your inflammation age is based on your ESR. And then to kind of follow up on that, the great thing about it is that there are interventions that you can do that will lower your ESR and essentially lower your inflammation age. And so it's not just a unchanging marker of inexorable time passing until we die, but you can actually, with lifestyle, with other things. What kind of things can people do what have you seen with your population? What works for reversing your inflammation?
Well, and I'll talk about myself. I've been able to greatly lower my inflammation with dietary changes. Like a lot of Americans, I've struggled with weight, pretty much my whole life. I was overweight in high school and basically my whole life. GLP-1 agonists have been a great help to a lot of people, and I'm one of them. And the GLP-1 drugs are highly effective in lowering inflammation. And, I saw that immediately. My ESR number, when I started taking the GLP-1 drug and losing weight as a result of that, my inflammation numbers were cut in half. But, there's a lot of, one of the really great things about ESR is, as we said, it goes up as you get older, and I'm not young, so there's in most of our user population there's some headroom. So in me personally and in our user population there's headroom. So I wanted to go further, and so I started looking at all the different anti-inflammatory substances that are available. The things that are really useful to me are omega-3s. Fatty fish is a thing that'll, within a period of a week, if I eat salmon 3 times in that week and then I test my ESR, my inflammation is going to be lower. And another one is very, very simple idea is tart cherry juice. I talk about this a lot, but tart cherry juice is something that's really lowered my inflammation precipitously.
The inflammation age marker, it's different, but it sounds like it has some similarities with the work Gordon and Lausch is doing on glycan age, which is glycosylation. Sort of a number of proteins in the blood and other inflammatory markers as well. Have you done any correlations with glycan age? It's a clock that they make available through their company also.
We have not done that, but I would expect that. I would expect it to be strongly correlated with glycan age. Or there's another marker that is basically a marker of, it's a spectroscopic marker called glyc-A, Glyc, that's basically strongly correlated with the ratio of triglycerides to HDL in your blood, but it's measured through a nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. So I would expect to see strong. So it's another glycan sort of related thing, and I would expect to see strong correlation with both of those markers. Glyc-A as a marker was a startup company that got acquired by LabCorp 10 years ago now or so. There are a lot of really good lab markers that indicate inflammation. What I'm trying to do that's different is, you can't really do phlebotomy weekly, I don't think. There are some people who are trying to do little collection devices that go on your arm and so forth. And I think those are interesting. But I wanted to be able to bring something into the home and get, a really highly useful number that you could measure without having to send your blood out through the mail. And so that's everybody is working on a different piece of this. I think it's a great community of people, but I'm sort of Jobsian in my thinking, right? I don't want there to be any friction at all that prevents people from getting the data and being able to act on it themselves.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And what you mentioned with the HDL to triglyceride ratio, of course, many of our listeners will recognize that as a marker of metabolic dysfunction. One of the original markers Gerald Raven and others described, and yet it's also an inflammation marker, and it shows how inflammation is really just another face of metabolic dysfunction with insulin resistance and oxidation. It's the common engine that drives all these diseases.
Absolutely.
Now, with Core Health, in your patient, your user population, because these are a lot of healthy people who just want to be even healthier, right?
That's right.
And it'll be fascinating. Do you have plans to basically release your data in some fashion, sort of anonymized, de-identified, where you go, this is the Core Health report for 2025. This is our population by age, and these are the cohorts over age. These are our average values, and then this subset used, basically did this intervention. And obviously it's just self-reported, and it's not controlled necessarily, but it's great. It's great epidemiological data that you have access to. It would really be wonderful if you started making that available to people, and it would help inform the users of hey, what works. The people who take 10,000 steps a day, they have lower lower ESR, and or other things as well. And
I'd be happy to share it with any researchers who were interested in a data set. It's a really good and pretty sizable. We have over 10,000 tests, ESR tests from a really nice diverse population of people. I'd be happy to share that. We're also trying to do more on the research side internally. So we've just submitted 2 SBIR phase 1 proposals, collaborating with another researcher in this and a public health expert. But for the fact that Congress failed to reauthorize SBIR funding in the last minibus, which is a topic for another day perhaps, to study what the SBIR submission is to study ESR as a marker of outcomes in an underserved population. So we're looking at a rural population of people in the state of Wyoming. So a lot of people from the reservation, and a lot of lower income people who don't necessarily have access to these great digital health tools that we love. But the core device is low friction enough and low cost enough that it can play an important role in underserved communities. So we're looking at that aspect also.
And I guess those populations, unfortunately, although they're socioeconomically depressed, they're not really agrarian, and they're probably inundated with junk foods and are at the worst end of the inflammation, presumably.
I think it'll be we don't know yet, but there are other studies that look at metabolic syndrome, which you mentioned, right? Look at that in low income and rural populations, and it is statistically significantly even worse. Across America is bad enough, but in these these underserved populations, it's even worse because there are food deserts out there. It's expensive to go and eat high quality protein every day, so people are eating Big Macs.
Yeah. And one other application that we've had some fun with, Bob, you were with me on our last 3-day water fast.
Yeah.
Which we did in October with Josh Duhamel and a bunch of other folks. We did daily Zoom calls, but part of it was we had Bob and other people doing the fast. We're checking inflammation, and maybe this time we'll check it at the beginning, maybe at the end, and the daily ones, for the reason we mentioned. But we're going to be doing it again in January 11th to be You're all invited to join us. You can you can register on our website, and Bob will be there. We'll be demoing the device, and Josh and me and a bunch of people. You're welcome to fast along with us, or just join in the festivities. But anyway, that'll be a lot of fun. Kind of thinking like, what do you think about the looking ahead towards the future? What do you think? With your background in medicine tech, you've obviously seen a lot. And what's the next moonshot that you're thinking of, or that you're excited about, kind of beyond inflammation? What's the next frontier of maybe home blood tech or anything else that you can think of that people aren't really realizing?
Well, I'm not. I think I have a lot of rows to plow still in the inflammation space. But just reflecting back, what I get asked about a lot. I get asked for people who are really interested in this home data from a completely in-home information loop. I get asked all the time for other biomarkers. So other people really respect and understand the utility of the information that you can get from a blood sample. And it doesn't need to be a huge blood sample, and it doesn't need to, there are a lot of numbers that you can get from a blood sample if you can. The instrumentation is nowhere near as simple as it is for ESR. ESR requires a very simple instrument. And so we would need to create a much more complex instrument to measure things in the home. And I'm not the only one working on this, but I am very interested in giving people additional data from the gold standard matrix, which is blood, in their homes, so that they can, make additional lifestyle or medical or lifestyle adjustments themselves. And so more data gotten quickly in a really simple feedback loop is what I'm interested in doing. Another aspect that I'll mention here is how to complete the loop. Once you know that you have inflammation, even if it's low-grade inflammation and you want to do something about it, one of the common questions I get is, well, what do I do next? There's a lot of information about that, but there's friction. So what I want to do is I'm talking about with some organizations about providing, or at least being able to point people to the best choices to make in terms of living a healthier lifestyle. So sort of compiling all that information in one place. We want to do a better job of that. That's what I see on my near-term horizon, are those two areas.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have because the actual inflammation doesn't necessarily indicate its source, right? It could be from lack of sleep, it could be from food, it could be from stress, could be from a low-grade infection even. So, but sort of a comprehensive questionnaire or something could help people point them in the right direction when they do the test. They could do that. There's a lot of value added I think you could do with that.
Yeah. I think we'll be focused on inflammation for the foreseeable future. I think it's the right place to be putting my mind share at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, and think about it. If you fix inflammation, it's game over with these chronic diseases. Basically, you reverse inflammation, the Alzheimer's disease gets better. It's such a factor. There've been studies where people get dramatic results by changing the inflammation profile, and this is a unique insight into it on an at-home basis, which heretofore hasn't been available. So it's super.
Exactly.
Congratulations on this device. I'm really excited about it. Well,
I'm happy that you are. I appreciate it.
I want to be respectful of your time. Before we leave, is there anything we haven't covered in this session that you wanted to talk about today?
Well, I want to make sure to let people know where to get in touch with me and where to see the device. The company website is corehealth.com, corhealth.com. And we have a lot of information there that's useful. You can reach out to me at hi@corehealth.com via email, hi@corehealth.com.
Yeah, and we're pioneering some programs with a local weightlifting gym here in LA called Fred Fitness. And if you have a gym or a sports club that you go to, you'd like to have them have this device, I think just, they can approach Bob, call Core Health, and, we're open to doing things like that, I think, as well. So, I want to get this technology to as many people as possible.
Yeah, we're building them as fast as we can. I think we have demonstrated that there's a lot of interest from that community, the people who are fitness enthusiasts. And so, I'm very excited about Fred Fitness in the LA area. And we're going to do some inflammation testing on site there, and, people can see it in action.
Yeah, so Bob, maybe we'll put your link to the company in the show notes, but maybe you could just say it out loud to people that are listening to this so they'll have it.
The website?
Yeah.
Okay, it's corehealth.com, CORHEALTH.com. Type that into your browser, it'll go right to our site.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Bob, for what you've done and what you've accomplished here. This is such an exciting time now in home monitoring, where we're getting access to more and more powerful technologies to really get insights into our making us not just less sick like doctors do, but actually making us healthy, which is amazing. So thanks for sharing time with us, Bob, and we'll look forward to seeing you again on the program.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This was fun.
If you are enjoying this program, please hit that subscribe button, or even better, leave a review. Your support makes it possible for us to create the quality programming that we're continually striving for. Half of all heart attacks strike without warning. Your best early warning? A CT calcium scan. We've made it even better by adding arterial age and liver fat quantification, all from the same scan. Now available nationwide without a doctor's prescription. Use the code Lufkin20 for 20% off. This episode is brought to you by L Nutra, maker of the Prolong fasting mimicking diet. Use the link in the show notes for 20% off.
One of the most common questions I get asked are which blood tests I check for myself on a regular basis. Well, I check up to 50 biomarkers, but the secret is that I'm able to do everything from the convenience of my home, and I collect a sample with this new breakthrough device. So no more trays full of tubes of blood, needles, or even finger sticks. And you don't need to be a doctor to do it. Then I just mail it in for the results. Cyfox Health makes it possible. Use the link below to get 20% off.
Can I start? Is it recording?
It's already recording.
Oh, sorry. This is for general information and educational purposes only, and it's not intended to constitute or substitute for medical advice or counseling. The practice of medicine or the provision of healthcare, diagnosis, or treatment, or the creation of a physician-patient or clinical relationship. The use of this information is at their own user's risk. If you find this to be on the value, please hit that like button to subscribe to support the work that we do on this channel. And we take your suggestions and advice very seriously, so please let us know what you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time. You should say that.
No, that's good. It's for you to say it. I think that's very good. Do you like it? You want to do it one more time, or is that good? I think that was good.
Yes.
All right.
You need to save the recording.